Presentation today, we're going to be taking an exclusive look at every single Nurbs modeling tool that's available in formZ. And of course, you can see that there's quite a few there. And usually we get someone that asks the question, what does Nurbs stand for? Well, Nurbs is an acronym for non-uniform rational B-Spline, which is just sort of a fancy name for the mathematics behind how these objects are created. Now, fortunately, you don't have to know anything about that. All you need to focus on is being able to playfully sculpt complex 3D forms using the intuitive interface and the intuitive way that we incorporated Nurbs into formZ. Nurbs is just another personality that your geometry can have in formZ. Basically, a Nurbs object consists of a mathematically smooth surface that can be manipulated with a series of control handles, and it'll always render infinitely smooth. A polygon object consists of a series of polygons, also known as facets, and all these facets define the overall shape. And the number of facets will influence the smoothness of the surface when you render it. Now, there's advantages to both, and formZ, of course, offers you both types of personalities. But our focus here is on Nurbs modeling. And since the focus is on Nurbs, we're going to begin by using the Nurbs tools and create sort of a conceptual visualization of a facade of a sort of interesting fancy theater here. Now, this entire project was modeled and rendered completely in formZ, and it actually goes through every single Nurbs tool. So this will be a great example to use to be able to go through all the Nurbs tools that are available in formZ. So let's begin by creating the towers that are on both sides, the left and right side there. And this will be achieved using the Nurbs lofting tool. And this is done by creating a series of cross sections, and we'll look at different parameters that control the lofting process. So let's begin. Let's do that. Here we go. Here's all the Nurbs tools down here and the modeling tools on the left hand side here. Now there's two suites of tools. First one is a set of tools that lets you create Nurbs surfaces. The second one is a suite of tools that lets you modify Nurbs surfaces. So that's why they're organized into two different groups here. So the Loft is a Nurbs generation tool, so that's in this suite. And with that tool active, just start clicking on some lines. And as soon as you click on two different lines, it's going to loft a Nurbs surface between those two lines. The lines can be vector lines, they could be spline curves, they can be open or closed, whatever you got. All right, you can see I just loft from one to the other. If you want to loft through multiple control lines, hold down the Shift key. And when you're holding that down, you can see you can pick a whole bunch of control lines. And you can pick as many as you want. Make sure you pick them in the right order, because it's going to loft in the order that you pick those. Let go of the Shift key, click a blank area, and then it lofts through those three. All right. Now it is applying some smoothing to that. You notice that that's not the exact shape of the original control lines. The control lines were used just as a reference, and that's because we're using the loose lofting option. If we, in the result buffer mode, change this to be tight lofting, or set that before we do the lofting, you can see that it tightly lofts through those cross sections exactly as they are drawn. And so if I do a loose lofting, you can see that to create a very complex organic shape, you can just roughly sketch out some very coarse vector lines and get very smooth organic shapes from that. All right. If you want to edit the shape afterwards, you can select the Pick tool, right click, and turn on the Show Controls. And there we go. So you notice that each control point of the Nurbs is a point that was on your vector line. So when you're drawing your vector lines, you can sort of think of every click, every point is going to be a control point of your Nurbs. And then you can just simply move those around, drag those around, and adjust those any way that you want. And there's guidelines that you can actually snap to, the X, Y, and there's a magenta one, which lets you go perpendicular to the normal of the surface. So just use those guides if you want to be accurate with that. You can actually use the Move tool also. You can move those with the Pick tool active or with the Move tool active. You can select multiple controls at the same time. So I hold down the Shift key. You can see here I could actually go in there and say Move, hold down Shift key, grab a whole bunch of controls here, and then let go of the Shift key, click and drag, and now I can move all those at the same time. You can also move an entire control line. So if I went here and said, well, I can grab this whole thing and move that wherever I want. So there's a lot of flexibility to being able to edit those things afterwards. Okay. Once we're done making our changes, if we don't want to see those controls anymore, we can turn the show controls off. So there's a rough approximation of a form for the tower on the left-hand side. So let's mirror copy that over to the right-hand side and create some symmetry across the y-axis here. So I'll just click 2 points along the y-axis, and you can see it mirrors it over. All right. Next, we want to fill in the front glass curtain wall that's in the front here, and that's going to be done using the Nurbs by boundary curve. So here's all the tools we're going to look at. Here, the one that's highlighted red is the one that we're currently on, and we'll check them off as we go along. The Nurbs by boundary allows us to click on 2, 3, or 4 curves, and then it'll fill in a Nurbs surface inside of that boundary. So let's see how that works. Well, we can add another line down here. Select the vector line tool, 2D, snap to the endpoint here, snap to the endpoint over here, and there we go. Hit E to end. Now we have a line down here. Up at the top, I'll create a curve shape. So I'll use the spline drawing tool, and I'm going to use this lock to plane through the first point option. When I turn that on, as soon as I click my first point for the shape, whatever I'm drawing, notice that it automatically locks it onto that plane. So now I can very easily draw and continue on that same plane. Snap to the other end over here, hit E to end, and there's a nice little spline curve. With controls just like the Nurbs, where we can move these controls around to further articulate the shape of that curve that we want on there. Okay, so let's adjust this a little more, right about there. Okay, all right, nice little curve up on top there. Okay, so now we actually have 4 different edges here. We have a vector line, spline curve, the edge of this Nurbs surface, and the edge of that Nurbs surface. So the edges can be, they don't have to be separate lines, they can be parts of objects. So just select the Nurbs by boundary curve tool, and just randomly start clicking all your edges. And as soon as it sees that there's 2, 3, or 4 edges that form a closed boundary, it'll automatically fill in that space for you. And there we have a nice filled in area within that boundary. Now another variation of this, if we move to the next tool, which is Nurbs by UV curves, and you can see we can actually fill in more curves in the middle area here to help formZ interpolate what the center surface will actually look like. So the boundary just automatically fills in an area for you. With the Nurbs by UV curves, we can actually tell it by adding extra curves there. So let's see how that works. Well, I'm going to undo. I'm going to use some of these existing curves that I already have here. So let's do a move and copy, perpendicular, and there we go. Let's go up, I don't know, 10 feet or so. All right, so there's another line right there. Let's put a curve in here. Select the spline drawing tool. I'm going to turn off my lock plane through first point so I can just freely draw that anywhere that I want. Snap to the midpoints. Snap to the midpoint over here. Hit E to end. There we go. Nice little curve there. And then start grabbing these controls. Tap the command key or control key on Windows to move it perpendicular or parallel to the plane. So just drag those, and there we go. We get something that looks like that. All right. So anyways, we're getting a network of curves now. So you can see that it'll fill in the boundary, but also conform to these additional internal curves that are there. Now, when you select the Nurbs by UV curve tool, you can select these in any order, but I'm going to select them in a specific order just to sort of show you that you can sort of think of this tool as a two-way lofting process. So you have to have a set of curves that are going in one direction, sort of like a lofting process that way. And then you have another set of curves going in the opposite direction. So it would be like lofting through these. And it actually is lofting through all of them at the same time. So now I let go of the shift key, click a blank area, it executes the Nurbs by UV and just sort of shrink wraps the surface over all those wires that are there. All right, and there's a set of controls that can be used to further edit that. All right, now speaking of editing those controls, let's look at another tool that's available for being able to edit those control parameters. Now we can right click and turn on the show controls, but there's also a Nurbs edit tool, which turns on the controls and gives you additional information inside the tool options palette, which is not available if you're just right clicking and turning on and showing the controls only. So let's take a quick look at that. So what we'll do is select the Nurbs edit tool, click on any Nurbs object. It gives you the controls that you can move and modify, but notice as I select these controls that are there, there's additional options inside the tool options here for actually giving it specific XYZ positions of where those controls are. You can be a parallel or perpendicular and all sorts of other stuff. We can swap the U and V directions. We'll talk about that in just a bit here, about the U and V directions in just a moment. But anyways, there's additional editing capabilities with that tool. Okay. Okay, so we're making some progress here. We got the front curtain wall form, but I want actually the front door to be, or the front entrance to be sort of a curved wall over here. And if I sort of like this overall form, I can use the split tool to actually split that existing form into a smaller subset of surfaces. So the Nurbs Split tool lets you slice a Nurbs surface into smaller network of separate Nurbs surfaces, which is a great way to add additional detail into the overall form. So I can keep the overall form and just sort of slice it up. So let's see how this works. Let's take this Nurbs Split. I click on my object, and there we can actually slice this into 4 different pieces. We can also turn off the length U or length V direction, so we can slice it just in one direction or the other. So you can see here I can drag this down a little bit, and I can also type in positions and things like that. And it's actually slicing that into 2 separate pieces. So if I were to move the resulting object from that, let's do move, pull it out, let's say 10 feet. That is a separate surface. So let's drag a transparent color on there. So that can be glass for the front entrance. And if we look at the controls for that, you can see that they are 2 independent Nurbs surfaces, but they are derived from the original form that was there. Now, once we have that created, we can actually modify that a little bit. Let's grab this row of controls using a move tool, and I can move those anywhere that I want. And notice with the guide here, if I hold down the shift key, I can actually lock my cursor along the guide. So I can snap it back here, and I get that control line to snap perfectly back there. So let's grab this control line anywhere, move it along the guide, hold down shift, locks it along that guide, snap it to the back corner point there, and everything lines up perfectly. Let's get a little more curvature in the front here. So I'm going to grab multiple control lines, hold down the shift key, grab both of those control lines there, and then let go of the shift key, click and drag, and I can make sure the guide, as long as I'm on the guide, I can make sure I'm moving it in the X or Y direction only. And hopefully you can get some idea for the flexibility of being able to work with those Nurbs controls that are there. So we can turn the show controls off and get an idea of how that front entrance is going to look like. We need to create the sign that's on the front here, and I sort of want to keep this overall flowing form here. So once again, I'm going to use the split tool, Nurbs Split, and instead of splitting it once in one direction or the other, I'm going to use the pieces option, and let's split it 3 times along the one direction and only 1 time along the other. So if I click on it, I've actually split that into 3 separate pieces. And if I were to move and grab this piece and just drag it out a little bit, I can type in a numeric distance if I want. And there we go. So now if I blend this back in with these, we get sort of the nice scalloped look to the front facade there. Now, I want to create a little more of a gap here, and that brings up the next tool we're going to look at, which is the Nurbs Extend tool. This thing's pretty neat because it's not just moving the edge of the Nurbs, it's actually extending the Nurbs. So as you move one of the edges in or out, it's actually extending or retracting that edge along the mathematical form or the curvature of the surface that is there. And so it's a neat way to be able to make adjustments to these by simply selecting the Nurbs Extend tool, click on an edge, and you can see that there's these guides. I can't move that edge anything other than this guide. It's locked on this guide, which is maintaining the curvature of that surface. You can see it's actually matching that original form. So as I drag this out or in, I can extend or retract that. Now, you can also type in numbers. So if I want to be accurate to maintain symmetry, I move that in a little bit, type in a number over here in tool options. Let's go in -2 feet. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side here. Click on that edge, grab the yellow dot and drag it inward, and I'm going to type in the same value, -2 feet on this end also. And there we go. So now I have the same gap on both ends there. So now we can do a nice little blend operation to fill these in together. So let's go ahead and look at the blend tool next. Moving right along here, putting a lot of check marks here. We're getting through these tools pretty quick. Pretty much what you see is what the blend tool is doing for us here. Just click on a couple edges and it'll create a nice little blended transition for us. And there's a lot of control parameters that controls that blending process. So let's take a look at that. All right, here's Nurbs Blend. click on any two edges, and it'll blend from one edge to the other. And it is adding some continuity or some sort of tangency with the existing surfaces that are there. The continuity 1 and 2 is for the first and second edge that we clicked on. So we can make the first edge to be a G1 tangential continuity, and we can have the second edge to be a G0 positional, meaning there's no tangency. It just goes directly and matches up perfectly to the edge of the other surface. And if you're doing like Class A surfaces and things like that, you can go right down the list here all the way up to a G4 fourth order type of continuity with these surfaces. Okay. So at this point, we got a nice little blended transition over there. Let's do the same thing over here. Click on those two edges. We get the tangent and positional on the first and second edges. And that's how we can sort of create that nice little scalloped effect like we have there. All right, we're moving right along here. Now for the sign itself, we have this section that comes out. Now there's a smaller section that sort of sticks out that has the actual letters on it. And so we'll do the exact same process again using this inner Nurbs surface. We'll use Nurbs Split 3 times. We'll move this out a little bit. And then to create a little more of a gap here, we're going to use the Nurbs Extend. So we can actually grab maybe this one here, drag that in a little bit, and type in a number. How about -1 foot? A little less room here, so I'm going to give it a smaller value. Let's drag that in a little bit, type in the exact same value for this one, -1 foot. So now we have the same gap on both sides. And then once again, using the blend tool, blend these two pieces together. And that's how we create that front sign type detail for the conceptualization of our theater. All right, might be helpful to add some material colors to this now. So we can drag and drop the wood on the wood panels that are there. It's nice gold material for the transitions, and maybe some glass for the transparent part of the glass curtain wall. And a faster way, instead of dragging and dropping, we can also use the paint tool, make one of these active, and just start clicking on all the objects that we want to make gold. And then make wood active, click on all the objects we want to make wood, and then click the glass and click on all the objects we want to make glass. So we can use the paint tool to sort of speed that up if we want. All right, so there we go. Nice little, nice blended sign type detail in the front here. And actually, I want to expand a little bit on the blend tool. There's a lot of other ways that we can use this. For example, let's say I want to fill in the top roof area on top of the front entrance here. The blend tool can actually be used on multiple edges. And so if I go over here and click on this edge, and if I hold down the shift key, I can actually click on a whole bunch of edges. And it'll try to fill in a blended surface through all those edges. Let go of the shift key, click a blank area, and there it is. Nice little blended thing. And at this point, I don't want any type of tangency, so I'm going to set it to be a positional on both ends there. And you can see it's conforming perfectly to wherever those edges were. All right. Actually, we can also blend to just a single line if we want also. Let's say I want this roof to go back and I just want it to be straight in the back here. Well, I can just create a vector line, 2D, snap to the end point there, snap over there. There we go. All that is just a vector line. It could be a spline, curve, line, whatever you got. And then when you use the blend tool, I'm going to click on the edge of this Nurbs surface, and I'm going to just click on a vector line. And you can see it blends from that Nurbs surface to that other non-Nurbs type object. So the blend tool can be used on non-Nurbs types of geometry. All right. Okay, making some progress here. What should we work on next? Tell you what, let's move up to the second story here. There's like some kind of a balcony. So we'll create a second story here. And this will lead us into the next tool that we want to look at, which is the Nurbs Convert tool. So we can actually create any object and then convert it into a Nurbs object. So we can start off with something simple, such as a 2D rectangle, convert it to Nurbs. Now we have a more organic type set of controls that we can move those anywhere that we want and sculpt a more complex form from that. So let's try it. Let's start with our second story balcony. And that's going to be just a 2D rectangle. So I'll snap to the endpoint over here. Give it whatever size I want, and there we go. Now there's the controls for it. All we have is length and width. That's the only thing that we can change at this point. So let's move it back over here, move it up, and let's change this. Let's use Nurbs Convert. Click on it. Now it's a Nurbs object. So if we were to show controls, instead of the length and width only, now we have the Nurbs yellow dots, and we can move those around and sculpt that simple 2D rectangle into a more complex form. All right, now if we want to increase or decrease the number of controls on there, we can do that using the Nurbs Reconstruct tool. So it takes any Nurbs object that's already Nurbs, and you can increase or decrease the number of control points that you have on there. Now, it might be helpful to talk a little bit about some Nurbs terminology. When we're using the Nurbs Reconstruct tool, you hear a couple terms or see a couple parameters such as the degree and the number of controls. The first parameter up at the top is the degree of the surface, which will determine how smooth the surface interpolates through the control points. So as you can see, a Nurbs surface, if you set it to a degree of 1, it fits straight through the control point, so there really is no smoothing assigned to that. If you set that degree to 2, then in that direction of the curve, it'll add some smoothing between the intermediate control points. So it's starting to deviate from the actual control point position. It's starting to smooth itself out. And if you set that to a degree of 3, then it adds even more smoothing as the surface is interpolated through all of your control point locations. Now, I usually use a degree of 3 for most of my Nurbs type objects, but you're free to use other values if you want also. Now, the second important parameter is down here, and that's the actual number of yellow dots that you see there. And the value for the length U, it will determine how many control lines are placed along the length of the Nurbs surface, which is always shown in blue. And then the value in the depth V, so you put a number for the depth V, and that will determine how many control lines are placed along the depth of the surface, and these are displayed in yellow. And you don't have to be too concerned about, well, what's U and what's V. Just sort of think about it as the length is just all the control points in one direction, the V is all the control points in the other direction. Because you start getting these complex shapes, you don't really care which one's U or V. You just sort of think about, just change the number and look at the control points that are there, and you'll have control over what direction you're going with that. So let's try that with this little simple shape that we have here. So we go to the Nurbs Reconstruct, you click on it, and there it is. First thing we're going to do is look at the number of control points. So if I set U to 4, boom, now we got 4 blue lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I set the depth V from 2 to 4, well, now we got 4 yellow lines, and you always have a rectangular grid of control points. Now, notice too that just because of the way the shape was prior to that, it did default to a degree of 1. Now, based on what the object is, you'll have different degree values set here. This was flat, so it kept it at 1. And notice that when we move those controls, we're not getting any smoothing. And so, it is a more intuitive way to edit that shape, but we're not getting any smoothing through the controls because the degree is set to 1. So let's crank it up to 3 in both of the directions. And now you see when we move that control point, we're getting that degree of smoothing in there. So sometimes you want the creases, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you only want them in one direction, not the other. So there, now you have everything you need to know about the degree and number of control points for a Nurbs surface. Okay, at this point, what I'm going to do is just sort of drag this out a little bit to give a little curvature on the front part there. And there we go. So now we've taken the shape and we can do a lot of other things with it now that it's a Nurbs. Okay, now if this is starting off the second story floor here, we need to sort of create a transition from this surface into this one down here. So we go back to the blend tool that we looked at earlier. I'm going to expand on that even further. If I click on two Nurbs surfaces, or actually they don't have to be Nurbs, they can be other objects as we saw previously, you can see that we can set our continuity, and we can also increase or decrease the overall magnitude of the continuity. So the slider here, as I crank it up, it'll increase it, or it will decrease it along the entire edge of that blended surface. Now, to sort of fine tune this even further, sometimes you say, well, I want to tweak it, but I just want to adjust this one little area here. Well, just move this yellow arrow, and now you can see as you drag that, you can increase or decrease the magnitude of the continuity just in a very localized area. So there's a lot of control being able to make that blend tool blend it exactly the way you want it, and sort of tweak that, and really use it as a design tool. It's not just a black box where you blend it and hope it works. It's like you blend it and play with the controls and make sure you get what you want with that blending process. Okay, so let's go ahead and go with that. So we'll take these pieces here. We're going to mirror them over to the other side. All right. There we go. So we have some kind of symmetry there. Now we need to fill in the rest of this area. We can do something such as pretty much what we've been doing this whole time here. We'll just add a rectangle to finish off this section. And we'll convert that to Nurbs and then reconstruct it. And notice here I'll set my degree to be 3 by 3. And here's another little tip for you. If I set my number of control points to an odd number, I'll get a nice control line that's in the center of that surface. So if I set the length U to be 5, then you notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, if it's an odd number, 1 has to be in the middle. So there. So now I have a nice little way to find the very center there. So now if I were to grab this control and drag it out, you can see I know I am getting the middle of that Nurbs surface that is there. So there, nice little wavy curve for the second story floor there. All right, we need to blend this in with the rest of the curtain wall that we have there. And what I'm going to do is split this top piece into 3 pieces so that I can then blend this section with the glass over here, blend this section in over here, and then with the third piece, I want these wood trim features to be able to all converge up onto the top center over here. So I'll split this into 3 pieces, do the blend operation again, take this wood panel, the edge of that, blend it there, the edge of this one with the edge of that one, and there. So we have some control over how this wood trim is going up into the second story there. Now at this point, let's give that the wood grain color. And we have 2 different pieces here because we've actually blended. The blend tool is creating a brand new blended surface. And so if I were to delete these objects out of the way here, it's fine to keep those as separate pieces. Everything's blended nice and smooth. But if we want to merge those together, we can do that. That'll lead us to the next tool that we're going to look at is the Nurbs Merge. And so what that does is it takes 2 different Nurbs surfaces and it merges them together to make it one. And they don't even have to be touching. I mean, there can be an actual gap there, and it'll move those 2 edges together. And there's some different controls we can do to control the smoothness of where it merges those 2 pieces into one. All right, so let's try it with these objects. Select Merge, click on your 2 pieces, and there it is. It's done. Now, if you want, like I said, there's these controls here. I can grab, and it's sort of like extending how far one merges or blends into the other surface. And so sometimes I like to play with these just to make sure you get a nice smooth transition there. And sometimes that also helps, like based on the complexity of your surfaces, you might get a little wrinkle in there or something to sort of move those controls out a little bit, and you sort of iron out that merging a position of where those 2 surfaces are coming together. And you can type in numbers over here if you want also. All right, so let's do that with these other ones. Merge, click on the 2 pieces, and drag that just a little bit to iron that little merge section out there. Okay. And let's do it one more time over here. Merge. You don't have to move those yellow dots. I just like to do that because I just feel I get a better transition there. All right, there we go. Now we have this as one piece. We need to recreate those gold transitions again. So go back to the Nurbs Blend tool that we used earlier. Just click on those pieces. Oop, we got tangent on the first one, and we want a positional on the second, and we get a look like that. All right, now here, notice that we get something a little bit different. Now we have 1 edge here, we have 2 edges over here, and that's not a problem. Just hold down the Shift key, click on 3 different edges, and you see it blends from one to the other 2 over there. So click on that one, hold down Shift key, click on these 2, click, and there you go. Nice little transitions are now updated based on the new position of where these wood panels are. All right, how's that? Moving along pretty well here. We're knocking off a lot of the Nurbs tools. Here's another one we can look at, the Nurbs Insert Knot. And what is that doing for us? Well, what that's doing is allowing us to add a control line anywhere that we want without disturbing the shape itself. This is in contrast to the Nurbs Reconstruct. The Nurbs Reconstruct globally increases or decreases the number of controls on the entire object. Whereas here we can just add a single control line anywhere. And it'll actually move the control points that are next to it to adjust it so that it keeps the same shape. And there's also a kink option which allows you to put an edge of discontinuity which gives you sharp edges or creases into that one NURBS surface that is there. So there's a lot of things we can do with this one. Let's try it. So if we look at the right side tower here, we're going to turn on the show controls and drag that, and of course you can see a nice smooth shape that we have there. Now let's say I want to add some additional controls just in this area here. I can use the NURBS insert knot. I click on it. I can add the control either in the U or the V direction, and by moving that you can see I can control the position of where that's going to be placed, and it is adjusting the controls next to it so that it is not disturbing my NURBS shape as it is. And there's also this kink option. I turn it on, and it actually forces that control line to be an edge of discontinuity in the surface. And to sort of show you the result of that, if I grab this control and pull it off to the side and move it, you can see now we're getting a very sharp edge there. So let's turn off the controls, and I think you get the effect I'm trying to see there. Okay, so even though this is one NURBS surface, we got a nice little crease in there. All right, another tool that we need to look at is the NURBS Extract curve. And so what this does allows us to take a NURBS surface and we can extract any number of NURBS spline curves from that form. So these can be used for some structural elements or some mullions or whatever you need those curves for. Some sort of fabrication details. So let's see how that works. I'm going to take this section right there. I'm going to use the isolate feature, so we're looking just at that piece only. And then with the NURBS Extract tool, I simply click on my NURBS object. I can move that anywhere that I want, and it's just giving me two spline curves, one along one direction, one along the other direction. If I type in some different numbers here, you can see we can control how many lines it's going to derive across that. Okay, and you can see that I still have my NURBS surface there, but now I also have a set of NURBS curves I can use for construction or fabrication or documentation or sweeping or mullions or whatever you need those curves for. That comes in really handy. Okay, let's use the reveal option and bring all of our stuff back. All right, what else can we look at here? Well, let's look at the NURBS Untrim. Because what can happen is when you have a NURBS surface, you can start trimming and cutting. You can use booleans on it. You can use surface splitting to cut holes in it. And if you want to remove that data from it, there's a NURBS Untrim tool which lets you remove any slicing data that you put into that trimmed NURBS surface. So let's see how that works. So as we move forward here, I'm just going to place some boxes here which represent the position of the door. So we have a NURBS surface, which is conceptualizing the form of the front entrance. We have some white volumes here, which is representing the position of where those doors are. And we'll use the standard modification tools to perhaps do a surface split or slice or whatever we want. I'm going to use surface split, select my NURBS surface, hold Shift key and click all of my white boxes here. Let go of the Shift key, click blank area, and I've actually split that surface. Now, if I were to get rid of that intersecting surface there, I now have the opening for the doors. And when I slice or cut or trim any type of NURBS object, it is now a trim NURBS, and I still have all of my NURBS information that is associated with that. All right, and if for some reason I want to remove some of that trimming detail that's in the surface, I can use the NURBS Untrim, and I can click on the openings or whatever I want to be able to get rid of that stuff. And I always am maintaining my NURBS object. So how's that? So that comes in handy. All right. Next, we just got a couple tools left. We're moving right along here. There's only two left. There's NURBS by cross sections, which is what we got showing here. There's nice little finials up on top of the towers here. And this shape was derived by just creating some silhouette lines, which represent the overall silhouette profile. And then what this tool does is it cuts the cross sections for you. So instead of you creating cross sections like we did at the very first tower example and we lofted it, we let the program create the cross sections for us. And so all we need is some guidelines for it. And it also has a create surface option, so it'll also generate a NURBS surface if we want also. So let's try that. What we can do is turn on a couple of sample profiles we can use here. There we go. All right, and these are some curves that were created to sort of approximate the shape that I want. Use the Nurbs by cross-section tool. This is in the generation suite of icons because it's actually creating a Nurbs surface for us. So I hold down Shift key, and you pick them in either a clockwise or a counter clockwise order. Let go of the Shift key and click a blank area. And it's waiting for one more thing. What's the direction of the cross sections? They want to go up, down, sideways, frontwards, backwards. Well, I click on a line, or I can click on an axis, and that tells me the direction that those cross sections will be cut through those profile lines. And if you're ever wondering what the program's waiting for, just look in the actions palette over there, and it'll tell you what the program's waiting for. Hey, here it is. Here's the number of curves that are going to be cut. So we can put it at 5, put it at 10. And if we put the create surface option, then it'll also generate a Nurbs surface for us with a set of controls, just like any other Nurbs object. Let's give this a white color. All right, let's say we want some of our wood trim to be along the front. So we'll split that 5 times along the U direction. And that gives us a nice little section in the front here. There we go. All right, so let's pull this out a little bit. How about a foot or so? There we go. Actually, there is another way of being able to sculpt Nurbs surfaces, which I didn't show yet. Let's go ahead and show that real quick. I'm going to drag this out a little further so we can clearly see what's going on here. You can see that this is a Nurbs object, which has a set of controls, and we move those controls around, but we can also use the deformation tools. And when we use the deformation tools, it's deforming the Nurbs control handles, not the geometry itself. So if I do a radial bend, I click on it, you can see I can freely play with that geometry, move it this way and that way, and use these different handles here to move that thing around. And let's bend this maybe not so far, go back a little bit, something like that, and there. And once we're done, we can see all we did was we move and deform the actual control points, not the geometry itself. Okay, so that's another way of being able to sculpt and work with Nurbs type objects. Now this back here, since we split it up into 5 pieces to get the center panel here, we want to put those back together again. So we use the merge tool to merge these pieces, and then we'll merge those together and merge those, and we're back to one single Nurbs surface object here. So I want to create sort of the scalloped effect, sort of a tulip looking finial effect there. So what I'm going to do is split this again, and say we'll split this 3 times, and along the horizontal direction, and make a few copies of this thing. So let's move, multi-copy, let's drag this down right about there. There we go. I have a few copies there. And then what I'm going to do is take all these shapes that I have, and I want them all to sort of stretch and come down to the bottom of the shape here. And we're going to do that using the Nurbs Attach. We haven't looked at this tool yet. This is different than Nurbs Blending. If we use Nurbs Blend between these two, it would create a new surface here. When we use the Nurbs Attach, it takes the edge of the surface, it just stretches and pulls it to match with the other surface. So it's not creating a brand new surface, it's actually pulling the other surface closer. So that is the difference between the blend and the attach operations. So let's try that here. We'll use the Nurbs Attach and go from the edge of this to the bottom edge of that one. And of course there's the continuity settings to make it tangent or positional. And we'll just do it positional so it goes straight to the edge. Take the edge of this object and attach it to the edge of that one and see how it stretches and pulls that thing. So if I get rid of the bottom surface there, now I have 3 surfaces which sort of create that nice little effect that I was looking for. All right, now one thing to keep in mind, here's a little tip for you. When you attach, sometimes you get a non-uniform distribution of your controls. A real easy way to fix that is use the Nurbs Reconstruct and just adjust any of the parameters, maybe the degree, maybe add one more control point number here, and it'll automatically reconstruct the entire thing, which will give us a better set of controls that are uniform across the entire surface. All right, so let's turn the controls off for that one. All right, so all we need to do is create the little blended transition here. Let's use gold for that. Go from here to there. Go from this edge to that edge, this edge to that edge, so on and so forth, and we're getting that nice little transition effect there. And all we have to do to finish this off is move this back into place where it was. It's right about there, I think. That looks good. And then blend that back in there. And that's how, I mean, I wasn't sure what I was going to end up with. I knew I had a general look of what I wanted, and just by playing with, these different Nurbs surfaces and the blending and attaching, I ended up with something that I said, yeah, that's pretty much what I want at the top of those towers. It's a nice little finial thing. You put a light down here, and that should look pretty cool. Okay, anyways, I think you get the idea how that tool is working. All right. So what do we have left? One tool left. This is it. Last one. This is Nurbs by Formula. And I was thinking, how could I use that tool? And I was thinking of, there's a fountain in front of this theater. And I said, I want some kind of neat organic shape. And what better way is there to create organic form than through mathematics? And so here we can use the Nurbs by Formula tool, type in a mathematical equation, and have it generate a Nurbs form for us. And there's a bunch of preset ones that we can use here too. So let's see how that works. So what we'll do is look at the last tool, Nurbs by Formula. And if you are pretty good at math, you can type in some formulas here, equations and things like that. If you're not as good at math, or if you want just to have it automatically create some shapes for you, you click on this button here. It brings up a bunch of predefined mathematical forms that can be created. And if you see one that you like, you can simply click on it, and there's a down button here, which lets you look at other variations of that same form. And when I was looking around, I saw this interesting looking Klein bottle shape. I said, you know what, if you put a little water fountain in the middle there, that could look pretty cool, I think. So I went ahead and tried that, and I didn't have to know any of the math here. It just automatically put that in there for me. So here, you can just dynamically create that Klein bottle form, and we get all sorts of controls to further adjust that shape, move them this way and that way. You can sort of play with the parameters here, move the sliders back and forth. And that is a Nurbs object, just like any other Nurbs object that we have in our scene. So put a little water fountain there and there. We get that neat little effect that look like that. Okay. All right. Well, that's a quick look at every single Nurbs modeling tool that's available in formZ, and basically how it was used to create this conceptual facade of this Nurbs Theater. Now, the second story is simply the same modeling tools used over and over again to sculpt similar forms using some playful variations to match the look and feel of the first story. And also, even though there was 16 tools there, don't forget the Nurbs Convert tool can change anything into a Nurbs object, which actually makes every single tool in formZ a Nurbs tool. All right. So with that, we definitely want to thank you for your time. Like I said, Nurbs modeling is just one of the many ways that you can do modeling inside of formZ. And to check out more, go to our website at formz.com. And thanks for watching.